Welcome to another edition of the program, Hitches and Voices on independent television and radio. My name is Kingsley Okoje. Don't forget that Hitches and Voices is coming to you courtesy Network for the Advancement of People with Visible Disability, NAVID. NAVID is a non-governmental organization based here in Benin City that is advancing the rights of persons with disability. It is my delight to bring this program to you this Friday afternoon. Today's edition of the program promises to be exciting as we'll be touching on a very important topic, something that the community of persons with disability will definitely resonate with, as well as members of the public. Our sign language interpreter for today is Cynthia Godwin Aya. She'll be doing justice to our deaf community, ensuring that they are part of today's conversation. Our topic for today is building an inclusive Nigeria, implementing a friendly disability infrastructure. What does it mean to build an inclusive Nigeria? When it comes to the built environment, persons with disability are often neglected. Building our environment, most times when they design and build our environment, they don't take into cognizance persons with disability, particularly those on wheelchair and on crutches. How do they access public buildings? How do they access roads and other public infrastructure? But it is not just doom. We thank God for the National Disability Act and the Edo State Disability Law. This legislative framework speaks concerning this particular issue. In other words, we have a law that protects the rights of persons with disability to be able to access public infrastructure. And to do justice to this conversation today, I have a very resourceful guest in the studio today. She is an architect, and I would like to say welcome to today's program, Architect Cecilia Atuoma. Welcome to Hitches and Voices.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we would love to know what exactly is the work of an architect?
Okay, thanks for the question. An architect is a professional that has the responsibility to conceptualize and design and build houses or buildings generally for use, for human use, for general use, both human and non-human use.
All right, let me make it clear that our guest for today, she is also a member of the Nigeria Institute of Architects. You just explained to us the function or the duty of an architect. Let's broaden the conversation. Sometimes people confuse the work of an architect and the work of a civil engineer. What exactly is the difference?
Quite an amount of difference. Okay. An architect, like I said, designs and builds houses. But a structural engineer, engineers are in different categories. You have civil engineers. I think your question is addressing the civil engineer.
Yeah, civil engineer, yes.
A civil engineer's responsibility usually is within the scope of structural integrity, the strength of a building, its capacity to carry what it's intended to carry. While the architect's responsibility is to design. So the architect has to design first before the structural engineer can look at structural capacity of the building.
All right, I know there's a policy document that guides your profession, which is the National Building Code. Okay. Can you tell us about that policy and how it guides your activity?
Okay. The National Building Code for Nigeria very well guides the practice of architecture in terms of not just architecture but design, building developments generally across the nation, in terms of the guidelines as to how spaces should be designed, what kind of setbacks, regulations that help buildings to be better for the end user and also safer for the end user. So, and I think sometime in 2011, thereabout, 2011 or 2012, there was a move to domesticate the National Building Code for Edo State, which was done. And that was within the era of the Commissioner for housing architect Ewowan, France architect Frank Ewowan. And there was the domestication process which was completed. And I think within the last tenure of the last administration, there was a review of that domestication, the documents. And the last I heard from the last commissioner is that it was being passed in the House of Assembly. So I really don't know exactly where it is now, but that tells that at Edo State here, there's been an adoption at the regulatory level of that document, so that it's not just at the national level, but also at the state level.
All right, let's come to disability issues now. I talked about, in my introduction, I talked about the built environment and how the built environment is not accessible for most persons with disability. In your view, why is it so?
Good question. I think there's been quite an amount of omission and let's say disregard or not acknowledging the fact that we're not all the same in this environment that we live in. Wouldn't want to pass blames on anybody now, but I think I think sometimes when things happen, sometimes some things are left out. A number of buildings around us show that the built environment has not effectively carried along persons with disability.
Okay, because I'm thinking now, personally, as someone with visual impairment, I enjoy walking on the walkway.
Yeah.
I feel more safe when I walk on the walkway. But unfortunately, not many roads are designed with walkways. So someone who is on a wheelchair will have to struggle with his wheelchair, with vehicles. Public buildings are built without ramps. So when you design as an architect, do you factor this into your design? Or you design based on what your client tells you to do?
Well, what the client wants is it's very important, because the client is the one that has a need you're trying to solve. But our needs as individuals collide with one another. So a client has a need, he wants to build a house, a public building, whichever property he wants to build. And whether he likes it or not, that property is also interfering with the uses and the lives of other people. So to the extent that it affects another person or interferes with another person's daily activity, then the considerations will have to be put in place. And there are codes and laws that guide these things, which are entrenched in practice of our professions. So any building that doesn't have it, or where it is not considered, will be seen as a critical omission.
All right, I know that the National Building Code provides for accessible structures for persons with disability. The Edo State Disability Law also supports that provision of the National Building Code. So when designing public buildings, for instance, what are those things that are necessary, those infrastructures that are necessary that can aid the mobility or aid the access of persons with disability?
Well, there are a few items I could list. Very importantly, which we all use to our ramps.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say something with the first item which I've mentioned, our ramps. You will notice in a number of buildings across town where there are ramps, that the ramps are not accessible.
So even the ramps themselves are not even well built.
Yes, so that's another problem. So in a number of places you'll find ramps, but the ramps, even in a person that is able, finds it difficult to use a ramp. So if a person who is able finds it difficult to use a ramp, what would the hope for the person who is disabled? So I think it's an issue of being aware and consciously and intentionally providing for persons with disability. Because if you are intentional about something, you will take the effort to check the appropriate standards for the rates and the ratios and the slopes you're having. If you're not, you just put something there to fulfill all righteousness that you have a ramp, and then no one can use the ramp. So the ramps are one thing. Other things that you could have are lifts if you are having buildings that that need to carry a number of activities or persons. The other thing that you could have also are toilets that are built for persons with disability. Because even, I think ramps are most often found, but you'll realize that, yes, you have ramps for persons with disability, so when they get into the building, what toilets are they going to use? There are no toilets for them. So, and toilets for persons with disability are peculiar. So these are things. You also have road markings that are supposed to be able to allow persons with disability to easily cross the roads. There are also rails that are supposed to assist them in their movements, but a number of these things are not there. You also see our street lights. Our street lights do not show signs for persons with disability. So I think these things can, I don't think it's too much for these things to come into mainstream development, but I'm sure that's why we have this program, to raise the awareness, and the consciousness, so that we can begin to put a number of these things more in place, and our brothers and sisters that have disability can feel more part of the society and become more functional within society.
All right, let's look at the issue of compliance. For example, the Act, the National Disability Act, provides for a 5-year moratorium, while the Edo State Disability Law provides for, I think, a 3 years moratorium, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
From your experience moving around, do you think people are complying with this provision to make public buildings or public infrastructures more accessible for persons with disability?
Well, I haven't noticed anything really practical outside, nothing really that serious has changed much within the environment. I would not say that there hasn't been a change. There has, to a large extent. A number of buildings are beginning to show up with ramps. My only complaint is that it appears the ramps are not appropriately put in place. We must also realize that for quite a number of years, the Nigerian Institute of Architects have struggled with quackery. So a number of the buildings you see designed around and being built are not done by architects. So that's a problem. And if a building is done by an architect, it will show, because you see the difference, and the considerations that we put into the building will show that proper design thought processes have been put into this, proper regulatory recommendations or requirements have been put into the process. And these are things that we still have a struggle with. You know, people want to do a building, and rather than go to the professional, they want to go to a business center where they'll print a building plan for them. Draw your building plan here. So if we keep patronizing people like that, then we'll keep having a problem in society.
Yes, sorry.
Because a senior colleague of mine once said many years ago that if it was so easy to come up with a design, it will not take 6 years to train an architect. Today, people are printing out business and building plans from business centers. So what do you expect? I think that's a major issue we're having in society, because we're not having buildings coming out of proper professional processes. So I would like to use this medium to encourage people who want to develop buildings or properties to go through professionals. Let your building be designed by an architect. Let the structures be done by a structural engineer. Use professionals so that you can get proper outputs that will not only benefit you in terms of your use, your function, and your purpose, but also the society at large, and not create menaces or problems for society.
Okay, I'll stay on the issue of implementation and compliance. I know you are not the regulatory agency, and you are not representing any one of them here. But from your interaction and dealing with some of this regulatory agency, do you think they are heavy on ensuring that building plans comply with some of these provisions we talk about?
I would say yes. I would say yes. Just a few days ago, getting back to my office, I saw a building that was demolished just along Sapler Road. And I do not know exactly why, but I want to believe the reason is because there was an extended part of the building that was too close to the road. So they didn't have the required setback from the road, and the building had to go down. So I think these are some of the things. I've seen a number of X marking, red X marking on buildings because they didn't follow proper procedures. So I would say they are doing their job. Again, manpower is limited, so I think the regulatory arm are doing their best. But as a society, as people within society, we need to reduce these issues by also doing the right thing.
All right. All right, we'll go on a quick break now. Don't forget the program is Hitches and Voices, and we're still on the series of the Edo State Disability Law, creating awareness on the Edo State Disability Law. And this segment of the program is brought to you by Joint National Association of Persons with Disability, JONAPID, with support from the Ford Foundation. We'll go on a short break and we'll be back to continue this conversation with our guests. Welcome back from the break. It's still Hitches and Voices on independent television and radio. And our conversation has been on the built environment, making it more accessible for persons with disability. And we've been having this conversation with our wonderful guest, architect Mrs. Cecilia Atuoma. Madam, it's good to have this conversation with you. Well, you know, like I was saying, we talked about the moratorium period. Like I said, at the national level, it's 5 years. At the state level, it's 3 years. And at the end of this moratorium period, the law provides for penalties for people who do not comply to some of this building, some of these building codes. What do you think stakeholders can do to create more awareness concerning this subject?
Well, this is already one of such awarenesses already going on. I think more non-governmental organizations and private bodies, apart from government, will need to join in the effort of getting people aware of the need for us to be conscious of these things and begin to do things the way they should be. It will also be appropriate for us to begin to call out certain buildings or call out certain developments as much as possible so that we can begin to align more appropriately with these laws. We live in an environment where when a person is called out, it's called bewitching. You're bewitching me, or you're setting me up. But so I think that approaching the idea of calling people out will be better. The most appropriate option of what will I call it, a process I would suggest would be to raise the awareness with the body or the organization or the client who has put up a building that is affecting any of these laws that are supposed to benefit society. So if you've raised an awareness with them and made a kind of appeal to them that if this is done, this will be better, and this is what the law says, we'll be glad if you can help us comply, because to do this and this and this to society positively, and where there are where there's no compliance over a relatively long period, maybe a year or two, then such an organization can be called out with the authorities, like maybe the physical planning, and that is in charge of physical planning ministry that is in charge of development control, because they have an arm for that, and so that they can now follow up by calling them to order. It's painful when you've done something wrong and you're being flogged, but we don't have a choice if you will not fix it. We need to help you to fix it. And so I think it's not going to be a very sweet one, but I think if we gradually begin to get these things done, society will be better for it.
You know, what's sad for me particularly is that stakeholders who are supposed to set an example for the larger society usually fail in their responsibility. I'll give you a good example. Okay. Universities are responsible for training architects. And right in their own built environment, their buildings are not accessible. Most students who are persons with disability cannot access the office of their vice chancellor or their registrar or even their lecturers. Their lecture theaters are not accessible. And so you see people carrying persons on wheelchair in school like as if they are a bag of rice or gari. Sad to say that though, so but that's the reality. I would love to see a situation where government house, for instance, the office of the governor will be made accessible. There will be a ramp. The office of the SSG, the office of the head of service, the office of the, for example, the Edo State House of Assembly, who made the law. I'm sure if someone on wheelchair is to access that building, that person will struggle. I've witnessed several advocacy visits to that infrastructure. It is not accessible for someone on wheelchair. And so, don't you think that advocacy, that awareness
should start from the
should start from there? Yes.
Totally agree. And totally agree. So we don't have lawmakers, lawbreakers. Totally agree. I think it should start from the very government that has put these laws in place. So we should start from federal government buildings within the state or within the nation, state government buildings, and push for that, because the government will really have no moral ground to enforce individuals, corporate establishments, to follow these regulations when they are defaulters. Reminds me of an experience many years ago, probably about 20-something years ago. We were in a building, an office building, and the electricity commission comes to cut off the electricity of buildings, of offices that were not complying. And it was noticed every other office was complying apart from the NEPA office itself. So NEPA cut the electricity connection of NEPA office, and it was such a humor. So
you provide the electricity, but you don't pay for your own electricity.
But you don't pay for your own electricity. So they disconnected the office.
All right.
So I think in that light, it's very important that, I like the fact that the government officials that came did not spare their own office.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wish we had time to continue this conversation, but we'll find a way to bring our guests back to deepen this conversation. Like I said, I'm more particular about institutions that train architects. They should make their environment more accessible, because I was witness to a lady on wheelchair who started her program and dropped out at 200 level. Why? Because she said she was tired of being carried up and down the stairs, and it tells on her dignity. She doesn't feel comfortable, and she had to drop out of school. If only that school was accessible, it would have made life more easy. People go to work and find their workspace very inaccessible. They struggle every day to access their building. We can do better by ensuring that our built environment is more inclusive and more accessible for persons with disability. Once again, Madam, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, we'll do this again next week. To them, my name is Kingsley Okoje, saying, spot the hitch and be a voice. Goodbye.